This week on the Powell Not Found podcast, baseball in Oakland is over. The Yankees offense starts to stutter, and we talk about those uniforms again being sweaty, disgusting, and kind of honestly gross looking. Let's hit it.
I'm gonna tell you a story about a girl who loves gin. A national pandemic seized her birthday celebration. Although she knew it was coming, we tried not to tell her. She brewed some Irish breakfast tea. She knew her birthday was getting corona.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of the Powell Not Found podcast, available on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Thank you for joining me here for the week of April 6th. 2024. A lot has gone on. A lot has happened, and let's get into it. This might be a shorter podcast than normal, just because I'm trying to squeeze it in amidst all the other commitments I've got. So let's get straight into it. Oakland. Bad week to be a fan of baseball in Oakland. They officially announced that the Oakland A's are no longer going to be in Oakland. They're going to actually be a team in Sacramento for the next 3 years, maybe an option for the fourth year, and they start making plans to push the Oakland A's into Vegas, finally making the deal official, at least for the MLB side. And so it's got to be a little bit rough. If you're one of the straggler A fans that still go to the Coliseum to watch your team, this has got to be a little bit of a rough moment for you. So condolences go out to the A's fan base, who just suffered a really tough blow, knowing that this season was going to be their last one. So not much of a ramp down. You start the season, you're not doing that well. I think the A's are like 2-5, already dealing with a bad season, and now after basically a years-long struggle trying to keep this team, MLB finally drops the gauntlet and says, boom, we're no longer going to be here. So that's always tough to lose a franchise you like. And I say that as probably one of the last Montreal Expo fans that ever was. I know what it feels like to lose a franchise and see it kind of move someplace else just because of lack of fervor. And honestly, it's kind of sad. I mean, this is a long, storied franchise, right? And this is the first move of a baseball franchise since 2004, 2005, when the Expos left for Washington. And a lot of parallels, right? A lot of parallels, a lot of similarities. Those games were not well attended at all. I used to go up to Montreal with my father to see those games, and you could hear the players talk on the field. It was very, very quiet. Montreal used to kind of bang their chairs and make this echoing kind of rallying sound when the Expos were getting something together, and that sound, coupled with the fact that it was a dome, would just echo and make this stadium loud. But there couldn't be more than 3,000 people in each game attended. It was quite a depressing sight if you really like well-attended baseball games and full crowds. It wasn't very good. So when they decided to move that team back then, it was kind of expected, right? It was kind of like you saw the writing on the wall for a long time. They sold the team, and finally, eventually they went down to Washington, D.C., and it took a while because Washington, D.C. now has Nationals Park, but that was 3 years later after the Expos moved down there. And so we're seeing baseball kind of pivot, in this case with the A's, putting them into a Sacramento minor league park, a Sutter Health Park, which seats about 14,000 people before Vegas is ready. Probably to avoid exactly what they did with the Nationals, right? The Nationals moved into RFK, and that was a disaster to try to get that old park ready for baseball. And it wasn't the most enjoyable experience. It was kind of old and cruddy, and if you're celebrating this new team coming in to the city, this new franchise, you want everything to be new. You want everything to be sparkling on the first day. And RFK lost its sparkle probably when RFK was around, right? Like, I mean, it was not a beautiful venue for the first 3 years. And when the Nationals moved to Nats Park and they moved over to the Navy Yard, even the park itself took some time to really kind of coalesce. That neighborhood was empty for a long time. So it was like a long process, maybe about 10 years before they started having restaurants and options to go to around the game. You know, they had bullpen for a while, but they, you know, since it started the new park, but it took a while for that team to kind of coalesce in Washington as a staple, and that neighborhood to be the neighborhood where all the sports parks are. So now there's Nats Park, there's Audi Field, there's all those different there's activities down there in Washington. That took decades. So to see Major League Baseball kind of try to pivot with this decision and say, you know what, you're going to go into Sacramento. We've got a facility here. You're going to play there for 3 years. There's an option to pick up the 4th year. And if it works, you know, we'll move you to Vegas. If Vegas, and this is a big if, I think that no one's talking about, has Vegas agreed to take on the team? Because the last I heard about it, I felt like Vegas was actually creating a lot of opposition to taking the Oakland A's. It seems like their sentiment was hey, we'll take an expansion team, but we don't want the A's. You know, so that's funny to me that they are moving in this direction, because there's a couple directions, at least in my mind, it can go. Right, you can play in Sacramento and with hopes that you'll get an agreement with Vegas and break ground to build a new stadium where they can play eventually. You know, I just looked up how long it took for them to build new Yankee Stadium, and that's with the city's agreement, because there was some talk at the time in 2007, 2008 of moving the Yankees to the Meadowlands, moving the Yankees into Manhattan, out of the Bronx. There was a lot of different talk about where they should put that new ballpark, whether they should leave it there, and they ended up just building it across the street. But it took them about 11 months to build new Yankee Stadium, from breaking ground to construction. So that's not very long in terms of, and that was back in 2008. I imagine now it probably takes a little bit longer. So even if you're talking about a year and a half to put something out, break ground and put something up, test it, make sure it's a good facility, make sure it's a strong, safe, sound facility, a year and a half, that's super fast in terms of construction. I mean, think about how long it took the World Trade Center to be built in New York. It was 15 years, you know, to make sure that skyscraper goes up. Now, different facility, right? But think about how slow it is to build something structurally sound, right? A year and a half is nothing. So I think Major League Baseball is trying to say, hey, in hopes of building a stadium here, we're going to put them in Sacramento, see if there's a market, because now there's talk of expansion and more teams. And maybe, like they said, maybe this is the showcase for Sacramento, you know, to get a team. But we'll see, because if they can't get to an agreement with Vegas, then they might already have a destination in mind. They may just keep the A's in Sacramento. Some interesting things that have been said about this new ballpark. John Fisher, I believe, was calling it the most intimate seat in Major League Baseball at 14,000 seats. And all I could think of was the COVID season when the Toronto was not allowed to cross the border, right? They played in Dunedin, which was near Buffalo, I believe. And a lot of the players complained that performance, that the way that the ball played in a smaller stadium was just different, that they couldn't wait to get back to Skydome because they could kind of predict fly balls a little bit better. Like, the ball played differently because there's wind swirling in places where there's usually no wind in a three-decker stadium. So it should be interesting to see how the players react to playing there for 3 years. I can't imagine that after you've been in a major league facility, even if your home ballpark is the Coliseum, that going to a minor league ballpark is going to feel the same. It might take 3 years for them to really get it to get it to feel like it's a Major League Baseball park, right? That's kind of like one of the things that initially came to my mind, is saying, I don't know if the players are going to enjoy this, right? You get to the major leagues and you know that you're on the A's. You might be locked down for 3 years, 7 years maybe, if you're a first year. And you're coming 81 games. You're playing in a minor league baseball park. That's got to feel a little bit deflating, right? In 3 years, you might not be on the Athletics, to enjoy whatever Vegas becomes, right? So that's got to be a little bit deflating. Also, it reminded me of them playing in this kind of hybrid situation, kind of like the Arizona Coyotes in the NHL playing at Arizona State, because they couldn't come to an agreement with Arizona, right? And weirdly enough, this week they announced a new land that they're going to be building on Scottsdale Road, a new ballpark a new arena that they're going to be building on Scottsdale Road just as soon as the land gets approved. And so that they're trying to move out of that situation. Just feels like more and more and more we're getting to this point where teams are playing in different places just to, one, find another market, and they're not playing in dedicated fields, right? Which has got to be weird. I mean, it was just last year that Tampa Bay was... the idea was being floated that Tampa Bay was going to play in Montreal again, half of the games, and then play in Tampa because their market down there stinks, right? So it's just an interesting time. It's an interesting time for baseball. Also, the expansion comments coming out of this article about, hey, they're going to expand with more teams. And as far as I can see, Major League Baseball has a lot of problems with the teams that they already have, let alone trying to, get more. Tampa Bay, no attendance. Oakland, no attendance. Even some of the bigger teams on day games and games during the week, the attendance is light. Miami, no attendance. They have struggling baseball teams that are hurting for people to be interested, and they're talking about expanding out the league to 32 teams. I mean, it just feels like a cash grab. It doesn't get the teams that are already established in line, make them profitable, and then maybe come back to the taxpayers who this will, building a new stadium, the money has to come from somewhere for the city to do it, then come back to the taxpayers and say, hey, we're trying to build a ballpark. And maybe it'll go over a little bit better, because I think that you're seeing that the taxpayers are now a little bit more knowledgeable than they once were, right? Denying some of these teams moving to different places. Not to keep it local, but in Washington, the Caps and the Wizards were going to move. They announced this whole big move to Alexandria, and they were going to move out of Capital One in the middle of D.C., where it's very, very accessible, and they're going to move to Alexandria, and the voters went to Richmond and said, nope, that ain't going to happen. And now that proposal is pulled back. It just feels like people are putting the cart before the horse in terms of these big relocations, and they're not thinking it through. If anything, this year feels like it's the year of the artist rendering. Let me put it here. This is the another Athletic article that talks about the armadillo like stadium that they made for what the A's ballpark in Vegas is going to look like, which looks like an impossible thing to build, let alone a incredible looking building. I mean, it's literally a work of art, right? This rendering of this building, with a complete, LED screen on the roof and on the side. I mean, I can only feel legitimate pain for the people who have to fix the pixels that will inevitably go out on this gigantic screen. If you haven't seen it, look up the artist rendering for the Vegas stadium for the A's. It looks like, it got a lot of comments about looking like the Sydney Opera House, and it is a beautiful design. It looks like they took the Coliseum and made it a work of art, but it looks impossible to build, and it looks very expensive. And if I was a taxpayer in Nevada, near Las Vegas, I'd be like, oh, this is going to cost a lot of money. And so you start realizing why there might be a lot of opposition to bringing these things in. I'm not quite sure why Vegas is not totally agreeing, though, because they did bring in the Raiders. They brought in, they just finished and completed last year the F1 paddock that is in the city, and they're going to be hosting that race for like 9 years at least. That's what their contract is going to. So I'm not sure why they would be. They seem to be priming Las Vegas as this new sports destination anyways. So I'm not sure why they wouldn't want to do it, but maybe after a gigantic project like the F1 project, they just don't want to, go into another one right off the bat to build another stadium, to host another team. Maybe they feel like they've it's too much to take on. But going back to these artist renderings, I mean, I'm getting a little bit tired of seeing these artist renderings without actual completion or without confirmation from the cities that these things are going to happen. Going back to the Arizona Coyotes, in the NHL, they just announced this week that they had a new arena was going to be built off of Scottsdale Road, and if you're watching the video feed here, let me show you. They did release a video, the video is very, very corporate looking, if you will, but they're priming everybody for what's going to come in this new land. But if you actually read the article, it's an auction for free land. They haven't acquired it yet. And they're already priming the public for, hey, this is going to be the new hockey arena if we win the land. So it's not done yet. Kansas City, I think, just denied the Royals building a new stadium. They had, again, artist renderings of that stadium, of what it was going to look like when it got confirmed. It was denied. Tampa Bay, I think, put out an artist rendering of the new stadium in Tampa Bay. I'm not sure that went anywhere. The A's have artist renderings of the Sydney Opera House. Now they're playing in Sacramento in a minor league park. So these things don't seem to be going according to plan. If you're looking here at the video version of the podcast, you'll see this new Arizona stadium. They finally, after about, a minute 14, finally get to the renderings. And it just looks like a pretty conservative looking stadium. Pretty large footprint. But again, they don't have this land yet. So it's not real. It's just kind of hyping people up for something that may or may not happen. Hopefully it does happen for the Coyotes, because when I went to Arizona and tried to see a game there, because they're playing in Arizona State, ticket prices are insane, right? Like they are because it's so small, right? They jack up the price. They talk about it being intimate. You can basically see the hockey players close up, and those ticket prices are crazy. In Sacramento, I kind of feel for the people trying to see a baseball game, because it might be the most expensive seat in MLB. So when they say it's going to be the most intimate feeling game you're ever going to see, remember, it's 14,000 people. You're talking about a third of the regular size of a baseball field, right? I think the smallest park in Major League Baseball is Fenway, and Fenway has about 30,000, right? This is half the size of Fenway Park. This is a spring training facility. Tickets are going to be insane. And especially, let me cut back here, because the That commercial for Arizona is so ridiculous. It's going to be a lot of money to see an A's game, especially when big teams come into town. They're talking about Ohtani hitting home runs, Judge hitting home runs in their park. They're going to capitalize on the fact that big teams with big names are going to come into town, and there's only going to be 14,000 seats. It's not going to be a fun place to see a game. It's going to be a very expensive place to see a game. And it might turn off Sacramento from even having a park in the first place. Because remember, if you don't make it accessible to the people who can see it, no one's going to care. It's like going to be like the opera coming to town. Tickets are insane, so everyone's not going to go. It's not going to be accessible. So people aren't going to get interested anymore. So anyway, it's an interesting thing to see play out. I feel bad for the Oakland fan base, and unfortunately, I kind of mourn it a little bit. I mean, Oakland, to me was a competitive team in the early 2000s, right? The Coliseum was always kind of a dump. I felt like I didn't go see it. I haven't, and I'm not probably going to go see it this year. But more so because I just don't want to go to Oakland rather than going to see the ballpark. But I mean, Oakland had like a storied history. I mean, you're talking about Reggie Jackson in the 70s, and Jose Canseco, and Mark McGwire, the Bash Brothers in the 80s. Moneyball is the A's, right? All of that history being wiped away because they couldn't make a deal happen in Oakland, or really the city couldn't make Oakland more appealing to play in. I mean, let's not forget that this offseason that there was comments and there were stories and there were rumors that people didn't want to sign with the San Francisco Giants or the Oakland A's because of the state of those cities, because they've let them go so much. Let's not forget that that's probably one of the reasons that Major League Baseball is so hungry to get out of that city. And so, it stinks because you're looking at 57 years of the A's in Oakland, and now they're moving someplace else, and they can't find a home. It doesn't feel like the right way to do this, but who knows if there really is a right way to do it. It just doesn't feel right to not have baseball in Oakland, and it kind of makes you worried for the San Francisco Giants, to be honest, too, because if the city is that bad and they're not getting attendance, how long do the Giants have? I don't think this whole thing was handled very well by Major League Baseball. I don't think just because if you're an A's fan, I don't think you're just going to jump leagues and become a Giants fan. I just don't think that happens. When the Dodgers and the Giants moved from New York, those people who were Dodgers and Giants fans did not automatically become Yankee and Mets fans. They would root for the Dodgers when they came back. They would root for the Giants when they came back. And it probably confused a lot of people in the 60s when that was happening. People just don't jump fan bases. So I feel bad for the Oakland that they're losing their team, but I got to hope that one, it will be better in Sacramento, and maybe, just maybe, they'll get this thing worked out with Vegas. I just think it's interesting that everybody keeps on talking about the future when it doesn't seem like the future is really locked up there in Vegas. But Oakland baseball is over. Let's take a quick break here, and let's talk some Yankees baseball when we come back, and we'll talk about advertising over HDMI, which is just depressing. It's so depressing, but we'll talk about that when we come back. Let's take a quick break. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Powell Not Found podcast. Again, this is Mark Powell, your host of the Powell Not Found podcast. Again, if you're listening to the podcast and you kind of enjoy it, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts. I'll try to get it out to more podcast services. I just got to see which ones are in the zeitgeist and are easy to do. Let's talk about these baseball uniforms, and really quickly before we move on from Oakland, I know we've been talking about Oakland a lot, but this is actually the stadium that they have set up. This is Sutter Health Park in Sacramento. So you can see just how small this stadium is. Just a lot of seats kind of towards the field, and you're talking about outfield grass, maybe a couple boxes here and there, but nothing really that special in terms of a ballpark. It's going to be small. It's going to be tight. Intimate, the right word to describe what's going to happen in Sacramento. But also, before we move on to the Yankees, Yankees are 6-2 going into tonight's game against Toronto. Stroman pitched last night 6 beautiful innings against in the day game against the Jays, the home opener for the New York Yankees. Before we move on, the Yankees took about 2 out of 3 from the Arizona Diamondbacks. They got blanked in one game, but they ended up coming out with a series win, which is the only thing you can really hope for in those series and those road trips. You want to come out with an over 500 record in those road trips. And then they come home and they get blanked 3-0 with a struggling offense. Now, before we talk about the home, being back at home, being in new Yankee Stadium's 2024 new season, the vibes feel different. I want my biggest takeaway from the road trip and watching those games is that Major League Baseball needs to do 2 things. When the Yankees are playing a West Coast team, and I think this is not just Arizona, this is the Dodgers, this is the Padres. If everyone's going to play everyone, they have to start these games earlier, right? The Yankees, it doesn't make sense that they're playing an East Coast team on the road and half of your market, especially the New York Yankees market, is tuning into the game at 9:40 at night. Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, I have a life and a job to attend to. I cannot stay up until 11:40 at night to watch the Yankees offense be terrible. They need to start these games earlier. And I'm not talking about like 5:40, 3:40. I realize there's a 3-hour time difference between where they're playing in Arizona or California or wherever to the East Coast. I realize that. They have to accommodate the home market that they're in. But 9:40, they're playing at 6:40. All I'm asking for is 40 minutes. Make the first pitch 6:05. It makes a difference. It was a great move last year that Major League Baseball changed how long it took in between pitches. There is no reason that anybody needs to walk around home plate and swing the bat 6 times before they step into the box and take another pitch right down the strike zone. There's no reason for that. There's no reason they have to check the third base coach for a sign to take a pitch when it's 3-0. That was a great move. It made the game faster. It cut the game down from 3 hours and 12 minutes to 2.5 hours. Beautiful. Let's now make these games watchable. If you start at 6 p.m., you're starting at 9 p.m., you're getting into bed 11:30, and you pretty much know the outcome of the game. It's not dragging into midnight. It's not, 12:30 by the time you're going to bed. Just start these games earlier. And 2, my second point. That's the first point. The second point is, please, let's do something about these uniforms. Even my Facebook effects or whatever, FaceTime camera effects agree here. The balloons just went off for some reason. Please change the crappy material that the uniforms are made out of. It's April. It is April. And it's not that cold in Arizona just yet. It's not that cold. It's not that hot in Arizona. Let me take this again. My second point is these uniforms have to change. These uniforms are made out of the worst material. It is April, And it's not hot yet in Houston, and it's not hot yet in Arizona. It's getting there. And the way that Carlos Rodon looked, it looked disgusting. Sweat is pouring out of these uniform grays, and it's making it look like they're cheap material. It's got to be uncomfortable to play in. Like, I realize that players sweat when they play professional sports. I realize that. As a person who podcasts in a chair, let me tell you, physical activity makes you sweat. But this is beyond disgusting. This is clearly someone cheaped out along the line and said, hey, we can save a couple bucks by making these uniforms out of tissue paper. And let's find the same material that Kleenex uses, and we'll make entire uniforms out of them. These things have to change. They're gross looking. They're disgusting. The letters are too small. We've already talked about that. We've tread that line too many times. These Fanatic Nike uniforms are bad. The changes they have made to the away uniforms for New York are bad. They are not. They look good. They looked good when you were playing in a field in Iowa trying to replicate the Field of Dreams. Then it looks good. Every day of the season, it looks like you bought these uniforms from a knockoff store that was perched outside of the stadium. It looks bad. They need to change them. Bring back the white stroke. Bring back the fancy, things on the sleeve. The striping, the piping on the sleeves. It looked more efficient. Now, the Yankees uniforms, they don't have that much to complain about because they don't have names on the back, which is kind of like a godsend, because if they did, they just look cheap and bad. But they've got to change these uniforms. These uniforms are terrible, and they're gross, and honestly, it brings in a real element to the game that I didn't want to experience while I was watching. I mean, I'm going to be at the ballpark eating a hot dog, eating a hamburger, having a good time. I don't want to see my pitcher sweat through his uniform. It's disgusting. Major League Baseball, change it. The Yankees finally came home, and after a good road trip, you can't really argue with what'd they win? 4 games in Houston and 2 games, a 6-2 road trip, right? No, sorry, 6-1, 5-1, whatever it is. 6-1 road trip. They just lost to Toronto, 6-2. That is their record going into tonight. And then they come home, and I think a couple of things are apparent. I think Judge is not hitting well, and everybody's ignoring it. He's getting on base with a lot of walks, but he's just not playing like Judge should. I think a lot of the other offensive weapons in the lineup are picking him up. Volpe, getting on base, doing what Volpe should have been doing last year. It's been a wonderful sight to see him flatten that bat path and really get to the ball. Yesterday during the home opener, he was thrown out at second base, didn't get a good enough jump, but that's what he should be doing. I'm hoping that they don't see that and they say, you know what, never steal a base again, kid. It didn't work that one time. I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I'm also liking what I saw from Juan Soto on that road trip. Then he comes home and he's starting to kind of like, he had a huge up. He's going to have a huge down. He'll probably balance himself out. What I don't like seeing is a relief pitcher come into the game, throw for 6 games, and then get put on the IL for a UCL injury, which is what my man Jonathan Loaizaga is being reported going on the 60-day IL for a UCL tear. The same day that Shane Bieber actually got put on the IL for a UCL tear as well. His season's done. Pitched in 3 games this year. He's 29 years old. He has been hurt. 17 games last year, 50 games the year before, 57, and then 12, 15, and 9 going back all the way to his debut. Loaizaga had 2 really good seasons, and he has been hurt many, many, many different times. I don't think you see Loizaga on this team again. I think he probably recovers, and they use him as a trade chip at some point. I don't think you see him coming up. They love this guy, and he was great. But honestly, when you throw 3 games and you're hurt, and you only threw 17 games last year because you were hurt, I don't see how you can keep it up. You're only getting older. I hope to see him back on the team. You hate to see how this ends, but it's not dependable. I don't think you can depend on Jonathan Loizaga being that person that they wanted him to be. I think they wanted him to be Michael King, and they traded away Michael King, and they were thinking, hey, a good year of Loizaga, it's going to fill in the cracks. They're going to have to play a different game now with the bullpen. They're going to have a different game plan because now he's on the IL and he is out for the season. He's not coming back this year, and which is unfortunate to see because I like seeing Jonathan Loizaga come out of the bullpen. I think you're going to see Hamilton probably step into that role. I think that Ian Hamilton, I think he is nasty coming out of the pen. I think that's what they want, and I think it'll be fun to see what they do with him when they come back because you got to say he's out this year. He's probably not coming back till June of next year. Probably is your best bet, and so if they do decide to retain him, it'll be fun to see him again, and it'll be fun to see him come back with about 4 more miles per hour on his fastball. He'd be throwing about 103 miles per hour. But a devastating blow for the Yankees bullpen because this guy when he's good, he's great. And when he's on and healthy, he's amazing to have in the bullpen. He's a weapon. But just hasn't been able to stay healthy. The other point that I wanted to make was Giancarlo Stanton has got to heat up. It is a depressing sight in the lineup. I don't know what the changes were in spring training that was going to make him play lighter and feel better because my man is 3 for 24, hitting $125. That is not going to do it if you want to be a part of this lineup. I know the guy can hit a ball 4,000 feet when it connects, but if you're striking out this much, it's a problem. I mean, let's see. We got 2, 4, 6, 8, 11 strikeouts in the last 5 games. 11. If I had 11 strikeouts in 5 games, I would be at the local batting cage trying to hit every single pitch. If I had 11 strikeouts in 5 games, I would probably start playing basketball. It's a bad look. I know that Giancarlo cannot hit a down and away slider, but if you can't hit a down and away slider, then you get into the batting cage and have them throw you down and away sliders until you can lay off that pitch. Because pitchers are not going to not throw you a down and away slider. It has been his scouting report since he was on the Marlins. Can't hit the slider. Down and away. Yet he continues to swing at these pitches. I don't know what he did to change anything. I hope that he gets hot. I really do. But it's stifling the lineup from putting anything together at this point. And it's only been 7, 8 games? And it just doesn't show any signs of getting better. What I want to know is how long does a batter have to be in a slump for it to be considered a slump? 5 games? 6 games? How many at-bats do you need? If you're getting 4 at-bats a game, 5 at-bats even, if you're at the top of the lineup, and something's happened, or whatever, 4 to 5 at-bats, and you're playing 10 games, that's 40 at-bats. 40 plate appearances. Let me be clear. Before you start changing and adjusting. Because that's where we're at right now. We're approaching the decade mark of the season. 10 games. And it doesn't look good. Something's got to change. Something's got to give. Change your stance. Change anything. Get closer to the ball. Try anything. Just get on base. At this point, I don't even care if you hit home runs, because if you look at his stats, Giancarlo Stanton's stats, you wouldn't, if you're looking at the home run totals, you wouldn't think this guy is having a bad season. You'd be very confused about why the Boo Birds are out at Yankee Stadium. 24 home runs last year. The year before, 31. The year before, 35. 4 in 2020, but he was injured. Didn't play. Only played in 23 of the 60 games. You'd be very confused. But then you look at the batting average. And for anybody who tells you in analytics that batting average doesn't matter, they're not looking at baseball the right way. Does this man get a base hit? Not if he gets on base. A base hit changes everything. A base hit changes the dynamic. If you get on base, that's great. But the runners move station to station. If you get a base hit, anything can happen. A run can score. A person can go first to third. There's a lot of different things that a base hit should be valued over just getting on base. Buck 91, 211, 273, 250. Now, I get it that offenses have gone down in the last year, in the last couple years, because pitching has gotten so good. But if you're hitting below the Mendoza line consistently, and that's your rap sheet, something's got to change. Something's got to change. And he's not a great career pinch hitter. So putting him on the bench is almost worse. So we'll probably continue to see him in the lineup. I hope that Giancarlo gets a little bit better, gets some better at bats, but it just seems a little bit dire. I want to, we're about at 43 minutes, so I want to start to kind of wrap up. Again, been watching Manhunt on Apple TV Plus, the story about the chase for John Wilkes Booth after the assassination of President Lincoln. It is a great series. It's actually I'm so much into it. I went out and actually got the actual book. It's based off of written by James L. Swanson. If you're really into the series, I really implore you to go get the book because, like any historical nonfiction, I imagine that there's going to be historians to say, no, it happened this way, it happened that way. It's going to be dissected left and right. But there's only so much they can put in the series, right? There's only so much they can put on the page. But I went over last night and bought this book, read about 68 pages of it. The details that they've left out are plentiful, right? I kept reading this book and I kept finding myself saying to myself, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe it's this laxed. I can't believe security is this laxed at this point. It does a great job of putting you in the time and putting you in the middle of the 19th century America and what it was like. It really paints a nice picture, the book. It reminds me of the Jeff Shahara books and Michael Shahara books that Gods and Generals, The Killer Angels, and The Last Full Measure, those series of books written by that father-son duo, do a good job making characters of these true characters in real life. They really paint a nice visual picture describing what not only their emotions and their motivations, no matter how bad their motivations might be in this case, but putting them in the proper context and putting them in the proper wrapper so that you can understand how this crazy thing came to be. And so he does a great job painting a picture. It makes you want to go out and actually do the whole trail, right? And go out to visit these houses that are still there. The Dr. Mudd house that's out in Maryland is still there. It operates as a museum, right? It makes you want to go to each one of these stations because of the way that they're painting the picture, not only in the series but in the book. Ford's Theater, I've been there when I was younger. Now I want to go back there as an adult, not only to see a show, but just to see Ford's Theater, see the back alley, right? To see the Peterson House, right? It just does such a great job making you interested in history, probably more so than your history teacher, right? Let's be real. Like this stuff probably bored generations of people hearing it just written out of a textbook. There's something about seeing the series, making you want to pick up the book. It makes you more immersed than any textbook ever will, right? So go out and get the book. It's a really fascinating read, and it's and I always feel like you have to strike when you're interested in it, right? A couple months ago, I was like, I want to read the Oppenheimer book. I can't get enough of this. I think it's so interesting. And now it's been about 3 months past when Oppenheimer's in the zeitgeist, and I'm like, I'm not going to read that book. You know, so you really have to strike when the iron's hot. So last subject I want to talk about here before I get going and close the show was something that I had read from a Wario64 tweet. Wario64 is a online Twitter account that kind of posts mostly about video game deals. But he posted this tweet the other day, and it said, Roku exploring taking over HDMI feeds with ads, parenthetical, on a Roku TV, such as displaying ads on the screen when a video game is paused. Pauses could be identified by grabbing frames of the video feed as well as monitoring the audio feed. Now, if you actually go to the article that he's taking this is from lowpass.cc. Roku explores taking over HDMI feeds with ads, making use of every pause. They're exploring ways to show consumer ads on its TVs even when they're not using the streaming platform. This way, when an owner of a Roku TV takes a short break from playing a game on their Xbox or streaming something on an Apple TV device connected to the TV set, Roku would use that break to show ads. If this comes to pass, now, again, if this comes to pass, I will take my Roku TV. Let me start this again. If this comes to pass, I will take my Roku TV and chuck it so hard into a dumpster. I will take my second Roku TV, which I thoroughly enjoy right now, and put it in a dumpster. I am so over things being advertised to me. Whether it's on the TV, whether it's on streaming platforms that I pay for to get, whether it's on the uniforms of baseball players, on the patches, on their helmets, or whether it's on the Roku menu, or whether it's on the Roku screensaver, things are always trying to get me to do anything. If they start serving ads to me in the middle of a video game, a place where I'm using the monitor as a passive participant to show me something, I will go and find my old TV that my grandfather used that has no connection to the internet and use that instead. I will use a television, a computer monitor that cannot show me ads and use that instead. That would be such an aggressive advertising move that I would never use Roku again. I already don't like the fact that Roku collects information on you unless you deactivate it in the back-end settings. And they bury that setting, by the way. They collect information about everything you're watching or whatever. That's why these Roku TVs are so cheap, right? That's why you can get a 55-inch for $300. You're trading that information, right, for a cheaper TV, right? But to take over my HDMI feed, come on. I don't want to be. Don't take over my activity at this point to show me an ad for Kleenex. Like, if I will go read a book. I mean, at some point, this might be the only medium, and I'm holding up this copy of Manhunt again, where ads are not inserted to destroy your enjoyment of anything. You know what's good about a book? Is that I don't have to read chapter 3 and then all of a sudden somebody tells me I can save 15% or more by switching to Geico, and then lets me read chapter 4. Come on, Roku. Don't make me hate you. Anyway, that's going to probably do it for the Powell Not Found podcast. I'd like to remind everybody again to go ahead and subscribe to the podcast and go check it out on YouTube. We have YouTube Shorts there. We have the full episodes of the video with some videos so you can see my beautiful face deliver this podcast to you. And again, thank you for everybody who has been watching and who continues to watch. And go ahead and help me out and subscribe so I can continue to do more of this stuff and do more content and whatever. So anyway, thank you very much, and talk to you guys later. All right. Bye, everybody. Bye.